Right, let's talk guitar amplifiers and how you can set them up to get a decent tone from them. Now, whilst I understand that sound is very subjective and there's not necessarily a right or wrong way of doing this, it's based on personal preference, what I am going to do is give you the tools necessary in order to set up any guitar amplifier so you have a decent foundation to work from. So we're actually going to start with the guitar first. Now, I want to make sure your volume is all the way up to its maximum setting of 10, and the same with your tone controls. Don't worry if you only have one, just make sure it's maxed out. And then we're also going to make sure that the pickup selector is selected all the way down to the bridge position. Now, you can find on some of the more budget-friendly guitars that the bridge selection on your pickup selector can sound quite thin and weedy and very, very shrill and toppy. And when you select it on the neck pickup, equally it can have sort of no depth to it and not really that much low end. Now, we'll come back to how we can use the tone controls later to try and combat that. Same with on the amp and how we can kind of compensate for that a little bit more. Now, to demonstrate how to set up a guitar amplifier, I've actually chosen to borrow this Orange Crush 20 RT. Now, there's two main reasons for that. Firstly, this is a very simple amplifier to use and it offers all the generic features that you'd expect from any guitar amp. And secondly, I actually happen to find this to be one of the best budget-friendly guitar amps that money can buy. And I thought it'd be really useful to demonstrate these techniques on the more budget-friendly end of the spectrum first, so you can apply them to any amp moving forward. Now, we're going to take a closer look at the control panel now. And the first thing you'll notice is that all of my dials are set to 0, which is exactly what we want. And we're going to be focusing solely on the clean channel. Now, your amplifier might only have a clean channel, which is great. If you have got an overdrive channel, just make sure it's on that clean channel. Now, we're going to start with the clean volume up. So we need a little bit of volume, and I'm just going to play a chord for you. Now, you'll notice it sounds quite flat, and that's because we haven't got any of our EQ settings dialed in. So we're going to ignore the rest of the controls now and focus solely on the bass, middle, and treble settings. And we're going to actually start with the bass frequency. Now, what we're doing here is we're dealing with the low end with the bass, and we're going to be turning this dial all the way around and adjusting it. And you'll hear a point, in fact, I'll demonstrate now. If I play just the chord where it's flat, if I go all the way, you'll notice now it sounds a bit too bassy, we've gone a bit too far. So you're looking for that sweet spot where it just starts to push over the edge of getting a little bit bassy. So let's try that now. And you'll notice there that I went to where I thought the sweet spot was, dialed it back, tested it a couple of times. So that way I'm training my ear to hear where I think that sweet spot is. And for me, it's around about there. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to the treble. Now, some amplifiers are really simple. They only have a bass or treble, or sometimes it's just one tone control, which kind of does a blend of all three. Now, if your amp hasn't got that, do not worry, because the same principle applies here. So let's switch over to the treble now, and we're going to do the same thing, play that chord again. And again, just adjusted it that little bit more up and down to where I think that sweet spot is. And notice already how that's transformed the amp sound. Now, we're going to switch over to the middle now and blend in that middle feature. Same principle applies again. And that gives me a clean sound that I'm happy with. So the whole point here is trying to find a foundation that you can build upon. So next I can add in my overdrive tones now, or pedals if I've got them. So for example here, if we were going over to our overdrive channel and we want to turn the volume up again on here. Now we'll have no sound to start with because the gain is right down, but I'm going to apply the same principle again, play a chord and twist that round. And we've got our overdrive tones there to work between. So then we can just dial in a little bit of reverb to have a little bit of flavor. I wanted to give you one extra tip here, and this one is really cool and super useful. So I'm going to switch over now to my overdrive channel, and this also works if you've got something like an overdrive pedal. And what we can actually do is use the volume dial to actually clean up the signal. Now, the reason you might want to do this is if you've got a song where the verse and chorus parts, for example, wants to be on a cleaner setting, but then you want to quickly boost that signal to get louder and more gainy for your solo. It's really effective for this. So let me give you an example of that. Here's my sound with a full, with all the settings on 10. So you can hear it's quite gainy sound. Now I might want to clean that up. So if I turn that down for a, let's say a verse part. And then if I want to boost into the solo. See, it's super effective. So it's a really cool trick, and I really recommend you experimenting with that and try incorporating this in your playing. I want you to think of your guitar sound using this following analogy. I want you to imagine and compare your sound to the most delicious meal that you could possibly imagine. Now, I know this might sound silly to start off with, but trust me here, this really works. Now, I'm going to think of a nice simple recipe. Let's say a cottage pie. So for this, we need some really good quality meat and some nice fresh potatoes. So let's imagine that the guitar amp is the meat and the guitar is the potatoes. Now these form the foundations of that meal. We can of course add into that some herbs and spices or some extra vegetables. And you combine all of these together and you can create some incredible unique flavors. However, you take away the meat and the potatoes, i.e. the guitar and guitar amp, you're left with no cottage pie, no meal, essentially no sound. You take away the herbs and spices, however, you're still left with the foundations of that meal. Now you can think of this another way. Let's take your home, for example. Think of the guitar and the guitar amp as the bricks and the mortar, and the pedals as all the furnishings around you. You take away those furnishings, you're still left with the bricks and mortar, the foundations of your home or the foundations of your sound. Whichever analogy you prefer. The point that I'm trying to make here is the guitar and the guitar amp are the most important elements of your setup. They form the foundation of your sound. Therefore, it is vital that you understand the basics of how to set up your amp so you can maximize the tone that you can achieve out of your equipment. Now, hopefully the tools that you've learned in this section will not only help you to maximize the tone you can achieve out of your own equipment, but also any amp or guitar combination that you choose to use in the future. Whenever I get asked for some advice on guitar sound, I always tell my clients to invest as much as possible in the guitar and the guitar amp first, because these form the foundation of your sound, not the pedals. Now, I know sound is incredibly subjective and there's no real right or wrong way of doing things, but hopefully the tools in this section will help you form a nice basis from which to start from. All right, that's it for today's episode. I hope this was helpful and you picked up some valuable tips on how to improve your playing. Now, if you enjoyed the video and you want to show your support to the channel, just remember to smash that like button and hit the subscribe if you haven't done so already. I've got plenty more covers, tips, tricks, and tutorials that I definitely recommend you go and check out. You can do so by heading on over to my channel. Just simply click on the links available in the description below, or you can simply wait for the next video suggestion to appear just up here. Thanks for tuning in. As ever, you've been watching The Music Halls. I'm KH. Until next time, keep on rocking.